Hello everyone, welcome back to another League of Legends tier list video made by me. It's been a while since we've done one of these, and one thing I wanted to do for a while was to make an items tier list. Now, I normally don't make content that's time sensitive in the sense that I don't make a top 5 best champions for right now, or I don't make a tier list for who's meta, mostly just because I like to keep my content as evergreen as possible, meaning it doesn't matter if you watch it 2 or 3 years down the road, you can still watch it, it's still relevant because it focuses more on abstract design centric kind of stuff. But every now and again I find myself wanting to do stuff like this because it allows for a bit more of an informal type discussion, and even though I am a fan of scripting my content just so I know what I'm saying, and I can kind of formulate it in a way that's a bit more articulate, I like live discussion videos as well. So what we're going to do today is make an item tier list for Season 13. Please bear in mind, because of the way I usually like to upload my content, I tend to keep a buffer for most of my videos, as in I'm usually about a week or 2 ahead, give or take, depending on which channel it is. Mostly just because, God forbid, if I get, let's say I have to go to the hospital or something, it doesn't disrupt my upload schedule, so I have a bit of a backlog. So by the time you see this video, 1 or 2 items might be buffed or nerfed. It probably might change their placement somewhat, but I don't think it's going to impact the entire item system all throughout, unless they do an entire rework sometime in the next week or so. Anyways, here are our tiers. We have in a good spot, needs no adjustments for now. A bit too strong, it's being abused by unintended users or too many users. It needs a slight buff to reach full potential, as in the item is good, just needs a bit of a touch up. And then situational but good where it's needed, self-explanatory. And badly designed or trash, please give it a rework. The item needs to be completely overhauled for us to see any consistent use out of it. Also bear in mind, this is mostly opinionated, and unlike I believe LS made a tier list not too long ago, I think he focuses more on pro play, whereas I focus more on solo queue. And one final thing, there is construction going on outside, so I apologize for that. It shouldn't be too disruptive to the recording, but if it is, at times I do apologize. And without further ado, let's get started. So Navori Quick Blaze just got a rework, and I think the adjustments it got was perfect. It used to be down here, where it's too niche, too specific, and no one wants to build it except maybe Tryndamere. Now a lot of AD carries are building it, and I think that's great because we have a few champions like Ezreal who could really use some kind of crit related scaling item even though his Q can't crit, and this was the way to go. Abyssal Mask, I like what they did to the item to make it a bit more, I guess, usable. The only problem is it's one of those items where you kind of want to buy it first just because of the Catalyst of Ions passive, but the thing is, it's objectively worse than any of the tank mythic items, and that kind of overshadows it. It's a good item, I just think it could be a little bit better. Then we have Heart Steel. I think Heart Steel's in a good spot. Not every tank builds it, even though we initially thought every tank was going to build it. And I think for the champions that do build it, it kind of does what those champions want to be doing anyway, right? Like Sion or Dr. Mundo, Shen. Those champions, because it only gives health though, it doesn't give any resistances, I would say it's fairly balanced, even though it does have infinite scale. Chaksho. It did get nerfed, but I still think that it's a bit too strong, mostly because it provides flat stats, and if it's flat stats, then bruisers or certain champions can make use of it, and you often see, let's say, Diana or Aurelia, or some of the quote-unquote hyper-carry champions to be using this quite often, and I think it overlaps a bit too much. On one hand, you don't want to give a mythic item which is typically supposed to be purchased first to have all scaling properties, otherwise no one would buy it first. But then the champions that do want to build it, like let's say Rammus or Ornn, they do capitalize on its effectiveness quite well, it's just that it tends to leak into other champions. Same with Radiant Virtue. I actually find that there are more non-tanks building this item than actual tanks. Occasionally I see Hecarim or Vi building this, and not really the problem with this item is that its priorities are not too different from Heartsteel, and if you were to build, let's say Dr. Mundo or Sion, right, their ultimates are pretty good for getting them right into the middle of the fight and soaking up tons of damage, but they are also HP scalers, so they would want this. Maybe that might require a rework, but I think some champions could use it quite well. It's supposed to be a support item, right? I think that's the goal, is it was meant to be a support item, something to help out your team, but it's being used by champions who aren't supports. I'm a bit conflicted with this. Rod of Ages, after the buffs it got to make it a bit more efficient, it's quite good. I would say it actually might be a bit overpowered, but not too many people build it outside of the champions that are meant to build it, the scalers like Anivia or Cassidy or Aurelion Sol, so I think it's in a good spot. Shojin as well, you don't see it used too much. Maybe I'll put it in situational instead. It's good where it's needed. The champions who do want to build it, they make good use of it, and it's not overpowered like it was before. Shirelia's Battle Song, it's a good spot. I like it. I think it's probably the healthiest we've seen out of a Shirelia's type item. We've had Shirelia's Reverie, we had Talisman of Ascension and all that, and that was pretty broken, but as it stands, it's in a good spot. Chemtech Putrefier is situational but good where it's needed. It did get nerfed recently, let me just double check. Well, it didn't get nerfed per se, but now it's just, the old effect was like if you support your team, it gives them a buff where like the next attack they take inflicts grievous wounds, where now you have to inflict grievous wounds. So it's basically like Morellonomicon, but with more supportive capabilities. But I still think it's pretty usable where it needs to be. Infinity Edge, after the rework, it is great, because the fact that it was restricted to being your third purchase or later was kind of crippling the item, and now they made it so you only need 2 items, which is nice. Then we have Mortal Reminder. The change to make it an armor penetration item again was a good one. I think the fact that it was only a crit grievous wounds type thing was a bit weird. At the same time, it is quite underpowered at the current moment. You find most champions still building Lord Dominic's Regards. It's being overshadowed by that. Mage is, I guess we can put it in situational. It's a snowballing item and it does the job quite well. It's a good high risk, high reward item. Morel Mana, I think it's a bit too strong. It's being used by a lot of champions that, how do I say, because of the fact that it works on abilities, even AoE ones, you see champions like Kayn or Hecarim making use of it, and Hecarim, maybe you can argue that he deserves it or he needs it because he uses a lot of mana, but someone like Kayn I don't think should be using this item too much. It might just be personal bias. I just believe that the way the stats are distributed and how it impacts their AD scaling is quite overtuned, and I think it should be either slightly reworked or adjusted to where it can't be abused by hypercarry, super mobile assassin junglers like that. Seraph's Embrace, after the nerf, they really cannot make a decision on this item. They can't make up their mind, but the version we have now is a good spot. They did bring back the shield, which is something that I think was important for champions who built it to have. And I like this rendition of it, which was the original rendition, just instead of like you casting it, or no, I think it was always passively activated. No, you cast it and then you use your current mana, but anyways, I digress. Asterix Gauge could be better. It has been progressively buffed, right, where it used to be like 40% base AD and like 75% bonus health shield, and now it's 50% and then 85% or something like that. But I think ever since it lost the lifeline regeneration thing to where it regenerates your health like it used to build off of Phage, I don't think it builds anymore. No, it still builds off Phage, but it just doesn't have the regeneration passive anymore. After it got reworked to be similar to what it was prior to the mythic item system, I think it's fallen off in relevance a bit, and it could use a bit more. It's fine as it is, just needs a little bit more, I think. Singles for Spirit Visage, it got nerfed really hard. While the shielding value helps, the fact that it increases healing and shielding, I think it's only effective on champions who can do both, like Olaf or what's another champion that shields and heals? Maybe I think it's just Olaf actually. Like you really need to capitalize on the passive, both aspects of it for it to be effective, and they could stand to make it a bit better. Sunfire Aegis is in a good spot, I think, or yeah, no, it's in a good spot. And same with Black Cleaver, it got gradual buffs throughout the years, and now it's in a very decent spot. I think the fact that I see some champions building it first may seem alarming to some people, but I think that it's meant to be a good first purchase, right? It's a very effective array of stats, and it stays with you throughout the rest of the game. In fact, I'm surprised that Black Cleaver is not a mythic item, with how much influence it had before the mythic item system rework. Bloodthirster after the rework is in a very good spot. I like what they did to it, and I think it benefits everyone who wants to build it. Ravenous Hydra is, I would say, situational. A few weeks or a few months ago it would have been in the bit too strong category, but after they nerfed it and adjusted it to be a bit more tailor made, I think it's in a more healthy position. Warmogs could use a buff. It hasn't seen much use all throughout season 11, 12, and early 13. And with Heartsteel now in play, there's even less of an incentive to build this item. Mostly just because tanks get exploded at every fight now anyway, so there's no reason to play for like, you go for a quick trade, and then you leave combat and regenerate for a bit. Everyone just goes hard in the paint, all in, just go big or go home. So no one really buys this item anymore, and I think that should be adjusted. Runon's Hurricane is situational, but good where it's needed. Same with Wit's End, it's in a decent spot, just not an all-purpose build. Lichbane could use a bit more love. It's one of the lesser purchased AP items in the game. That might just be because not everyone uses auto attacks, but even on the champions that want to, like Diana, or I've even seen like Kassadin and Echo players not build it, maybe this could be tuned a bit better. Banshee's build too. I might say situational, but I think Banshee's is actually underpowered. It needs some more stats. Like, you're taking quite a big... You're not only forfeiting the item slot, but the fact that you can't really control what you can block. It would be interesting if Banshee's Veil could be activated like an active item, but that also might be too overpowered. Redemption, I think, also needs a buff. Not many champions build it, and even the ones who do build it don't build it that often. Frozen Heart is situational, but in a good spot. I think Nash's Tooth is a relatively good item to have. The champions who want to build it can build it well. Rylai's is situational, but in a good spot as well. Gwynsu's, I'm going to put that there too. Void Staff is a good all-purpose item, and I think it is a very good late game purchase for mages, or even mid game purchase. Mercurial Scimitar is situational, but good where it's needed. Ghostblade needs a bit of a buff. So the reason why so many champions built Ghostblade back in the past was because there was actually no good first purchase for assassins, right? And then they added the mythic items like Prowlers, Eclipse, Dustblade. So now Ghostblade's purpose has been kind of replaced, and I think if they want to make it a good second or third purchase, they do have to step it up a bit. Mobility is a lot more rampant now than it used to be, so therefore you have a lot of assassins who are going for more utility stuff, like let's say Edge of Night, or full-on execution like Collector. Randuin's situational but good. Protobelt is in a good spot, I'm gonna say. Yep. Play the Rune King, obviously one of the most broken items in the game. Even though I abuse it a lot, I think it really should be nerfed because this item is a crime. Let's just leave it at that. Maw is situational but good where it's needed. I actually do like the change they did to where they took out the ability haste and gave him more AD, since that actually makes the shield a bit stronger. Morellonomicon sucks. The change they did to it was awful. Please fix this item, right? And then no, I'm not trying to parrot the whole like LS thing about building Grievous Wounds is a waste of time or money, but no, seriously, Morellonomicon got gutted really hard and it needs some help. Locket, I think, deserves a buff. It got nerfed because it was too effective, and now it needs to be buffed again because other support items are just better. Mikhail's Crucible, situational but good where it's needed. Ardent Sensor needs a buff. I know they're traumatized by the Ardent Sensor meta, but even if you have a team full of auto attackers, you don't see supports building this item that much. Staff of Flowing Water is situational but good. Edge of Night, I think, could use a buff. Not many assassins build it, even though I did say that they build it more than Ghostblade. You often see assassins going for like, what should I say? How should I say? They either go for, let's say, Axiom Arc, or they go for Umbral Glaive, just more utility, and I don't find Edge of Night being built too often. Imperial Mandate is okay. I'm ambivalent to it. I don't really have an opinion of it. It was overpowered at a point, and now I think it's okay. Force of Nature is situational but good where it's needed. Horizon Focus. This item, I know there's like Vel'Koz and Xerath and Ziggs who like to build it, but this item is really weird. It needs to be adjusted. I think it needs to be reworked in some way because you could say situational, but I think ever since they introduced Shadow Flame, this item was just discarded. Cosmic Drive, as of writing this video, or as of making this video, it is getting reworked on the PvE to lose the health bonus and gain more AP. I'm gonna still say it needs a slight buff to reach full potential, even with the change that we're gonna be getting soon, but I guess in time we'll see how effective that change is. Okay, we're making good progress, let's continue. Riftmaker Trash, rework this item. Yes, there are some champions who build it like Gwen or Kayle, but the problem with Riftmaker is the same problem that Conqueror had back when it was like after 4 seconds of being in combat you used it and you get a buff, or like Lethal Tempo, where after a second and a half of your first auto attack it gives you an attack speed buff. It should be more of a stacking mechanic, I think, like a Conqueror type thing, than a wait a few seconds and it will activate, because by then either the fight is over or champions have run away or you're running away. Night Harvester, it's a good spot, I like it. Demonic Embrace, even after it got nerfed for melee champions, is still being abused by champions that I don't think were meant to build it. Like, this was supposed to be your Mordekaiser item, maybe your your Gragas item, maybe not so much Gragas, but you see like a Mumu building it, or you still see Diana building it, or you still see Maokai building it, and I don't think those champions are meant to build that item. Silvermere Dawn Ass. This item is arguably the least purchased item in the entire game. It might be because QSS is so situational, right? as it is, and this is supposed to be the Bruiser version of QSS, but Bruisers usually build tenacity, like Merc Tread, so they have Legend Tenacity, Unflinching, and they also can face tank CC a bit better compared to squishy champions, where Mercurial Scimitar is actually quite good. Even so, this item is awful. It needs to be reworked in some way. Death Dance is in a good spot. Similarly to Maw, I do like the fact that they took away the ability haste because everyone was abusing it at that point, and made it so it just gave a lot of AD. That's good. Chainsword, situational but good. Gore Drinker has seen better days. Once again, players who were traumatized by the Gore Drinker meta in 2021, late 2021, but this item has been effectively worse than every other Bruiser mythic item. Like, why would you ever go Gore Drinker when you can go, you know, Divine Sunder or Stridebreaker and get more utility other than just healing a bit? You do still have a healthy batch of champions who build it, like Lee Sin, Jarvan, Riven, Fiora. Now, Fiora goes Divine Sunder most nowadays. I still think that this item has lost its purpose, right? Like, it was meant to be the item that you see champions like Renekton or maybe even set building, but I don't know how they could fix this item, to be honest, because the original passive they had of like the bonus AD was a bit too overpowered. At the same time, that was sort of what was making the item usable, and as it stands, needs some kind of buff. I just don't know what that buff is. Stridebreaker is in a good spot, I think. Divine Sunder, I am very biased against this item. I hate it. I think the power spike you get from one purchase is too absurd, even for the champions besides Camille. I know I always talk about how Camille's overpowered, but because of the fact that Divine Sunder provides both offensive and defensive benefit, it tends to be infinitely better than Trinity Force, which I'm actually going to put right here. Both of them do relatively the same amount of damage, it's just that this provides you with some more sustainability. And why would you ever not build that? They should either make it so it's a tank busting item or a sustain item, not both. It's just too good. Ludens is in a good spot, Everfrost is in a good spot. It would have been overpowered, but then they nerfed the active to where it's like 1 second instead of 1.5, so I think it's good now. Frostfire Fist or Iceborne Gauntlet, whatever it's called, it's in a good spot. Turbo Chem Tank needs a bit of a buff, too situational, and the stats are not as gold efficient as it needs to be. Gale Force is good, Kraken Slayer is good, Immortal Shield Bow is good. I think they're all in a decent spot. Maybe Immortal Shield Bow could use a buff, but if they do that, then Irelia or the other champions are going to abuse it. Collector is pretty good, I think. Dustblade is situational. Eclipse is good. Prowlers is situational. I think they finally found a decent spot for the 3 mythics to where they're not like trash purchases and being replaced by Gore Drinker. Now there's an actual incentive to go for them because they provide a decent amount of gold value. Serpent's Fang needs a bit of a buff. Even against enemy teams with tons of CC, you don't find people building this item that much because it's just, well, first of all, the only ones who can build it are assassins really, and you don't want to build this on an AD carry or Bruiser since you don't get the relevant stats required for those characters. Axiomark is situational but good. They buffed it considerably over time and it's now in a usable spot, but might be still a little too conditional. What is this called again? Even Shroud? Is that what it's called? Needs a slight buff. It is, for the most part, cancelled out by, you know, your, what is it? The Radiant Virtue or, you know, some of Roshrelia's. It just increased damage for a tank engage support. It could also be a result of tank supports being a bit weak right now, right? Like everyone's playing, what is it? They're playing Annie, they're playing Rakan, they're not really playing your Nautilus or Leonis right now. Fimbulwinter is pretty good, I think. It's okay. Shadowflame is pretty overpowered, in my opinion. Some champions are building it not for the shield breaking purposes or the anti-shield part. A lot of champions are building it just because it's good. It gives a lot of AP, a decent amount of health, magic penetration, and even more magic penetration against enemies with low HP. It's too good, in my opinion. Crown is situational but good. Rapid Fire Cannon's in a good spot. Essence Reaver's in a good spot. Gargoyle needs a rework. It is such a weird item, and I think that any time you would want to build it, you might as well just go for something more consistent that provides either armor and health or magic resistant health. This item is an armor and magic resist item with an active that scales off of health. Kind of counterintuitive. Deadman's needs a buff. It has the worst gold efficiency out of any tank item in the game, I believe. Even at max stacks. Anathema's Chains is situational but good. I'm gonna skip the support items because I don't know enough about them to really give a good assessment on them. GA needs a buff. It's too unforgiving of an item, or not really unforgiving, it's too demanding of a purchase. Like it doesn't do enough to warrant an item slot, especially in the late game, as opposed to an item like, say, Zanya's. Hullbreaker needs a rework. I liked the premise of this item, but now I don't, and I think it used to promote a very degenerate strategy, and now, even now, it kind of promotes a very degenerate strategy. Maybe I'll put it in situational, but I'm not saying this item is bad, I just think that it could be... they could have emulated or kind of illustrated the split pushing motif a bit better. Knight's Vow should be buffed a bit, I think. Leandri's is abused. This item is broken. Please nerf Riot, thank you. Moonstone Renewer is... it's in a good spot, I think. Phantom Dancer as well. Rabadon's Death Cap is never a bad choice. Serilda's Grudge is fair. It's a very fair item, I think. Then we have Storm Razor, which needs a buff. This item is also an item that has never been built after the Mythic item system rework. Thornmail, it's okay. It's in a good spot. Titanic Hydra is definitely the weaker of the two Hydra items, and I think it should be buffed a bit better. It's only really used on champions that hyper abuse health, like Scion or Mundo. Umbral Glaive is situational but good where it's needed. It already got nerfed, otherwise I would have put it here, but I think it's fine as it is. Watchful Wardstone, is that what it's called? Or Vigilant Wardstone? Could be a buff, a little bit. Supports only really build this if they're ahead. They don't really build this if they're behind. Zeke's Convergence needs a buff, just a little bit more I would say. And finally, Zanya's Hourglass is situational but good where it's needed. I would have put it here, and I still might put it there, but I think the gold efficiency was tuned to require a bit more of a trade-off between stat efficiency and the active, so it's okay now. Alright, and that's gonna be it for today. Hope you enjoyed. Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below if you agreed or disagreed with my choices. And aside from that, if you liked the video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Also follow me on Twitter at VarsRam, join my Discord server, and check out my other tier list videos if you haven't yet. But till next time, thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you again soon for the next one. Take care.